In working with B2B healthcare and health tech companies, we have come across some of the best tactics for marketing your business and some of the hardest tactics to use to grow your business. And what I mean by that is that there are certain tactics that have strong ROI with a more moderate budget or more moderate time spend. And there are some tactics that are really popular that have a very high cost with much lower ROI. So I'm going to talk a little bit in this video about what those tactics are that are more challenging to implement well in health tech that you may want to avoid this year, or at least create a new strategy for. And then I'm going to dive into the top 5 tactics that I would invest my time in as a health tech leader if I wanted to see a lot of growth in my lead generation, lead nurturing, or visibility this year. I'm Courtney Gallster. I am the founder and president of Amplify Marketing. We're a digital marketing agency that, among other industries, works within the B2B health tech space. And we help companies grow by leveraging digital marketing to support their sales process. Before we dive in, I just want to say that this is a very generalized video talking at a very high level about tactics that we've seen in this space really tank and fail for clients where they were expecting a really big return on their investment and didn't see a lot come out of it. And that this has happened multiple times with these particular tactics. So I'm going to talk at a high level about how these tactics fail. If you are planning to implement tactics like this year, I will give you an idea on how to set your strategy to make sure that it is effective. And then I'll dive into those top 5 digital tactics that I would absolutely use for any client in this space. So the first tactic that sees a lot of quote unquote failure in this particular space is overcommitting to events. There are a lot of events in healthcare and health tech, a lot. And there are really, really small events and really, really big events. And there are events that have a really high cost to them. And there are events that don't have a high cost to them. Now, you want to find yourself creating a plan that's going to create a balance between what events you're going to and what your budget is. And where a lot of companies get stuck is they think that these really big industry-wide events are the best place to go because everybody goes to them. And the problem with that strategy is that these events, number one, are very expensive. They are pay to play. You have to spend a lot to get there. You have to spend a lot on the add-ons. There's a lot of time involved with traveling and being on site and prepping and all of those things. And then when you get there, finding your people can oftentimes feel like you are searching for a needle in a haystack because there are so many people there. So in order to maximize your spend at these types of events, there are a couple of things you can do. One is to look for a speaking opportunity. I would not recommend going to one of these big events and paying full price without having a speaking engagement tied to it, because that is one way that you can really maximize your return and make sure that you're getting in front of the right people. The second thing that you can do is look for a partner that could either do some type of cost sharing or maybe has their own booth opportunity where they have a bunch of booths within an area that they can split up amongst different brands. Depending on the conference, sometimes that's an option if you have those relationships in place in advance. Or the other option that you could look into is attending as a regular attendee and just using your connections and knowing who's going to that event, set up appointments in advance. Now, if you really do want to go to this event as a full booth exhibitor, then you need to really make sure that you are pouring a lot of time pre, during, and post event into prospect development and identification and maximizing your outreach. So making sure that you're reaching out before the event to set appointments, making sure that you have something that's going to draw people to your booth and get them to stay, like maybe some sort of special demo or some sort of educational component to stopping by your booth, or maybe it's some special event that you have happening, like you host your own event off-site during the after hours of the event, or you have something really cool where they can talk to some sort of industry expert at your booth, something like that that's going to give them a reason to stop by and help you really hone in on the right people to make sure that you're spending your time and dollars very wisely at these big events. But what I would recommend to any client that I have is to really focus on those niche events this year. Instead of going for the really big and wide events that attract everybody and their dog, go to the events where there are very targeted talks and very targeted events and very targeted prospect lists for you to comb through. So that could be something that is really specific to a title within an organization. It could be something that's specific to a particular practice area. It really depends on what you do. But looking for those opportunities that are more specific in nature can help you create stronger ROI with your event budget. And I am not against events. I think events are a necessary component of your overall strategy, but it's really about choosing the right events and making sure that you're maximizing the time and effort that you're putting into them. The second thing that is on this list is actually really surprising to me, because last year was really the first year that this particular tactic built a lot of momentum within this industry, at least on the health tech side. And I don't know, I just found it really surprising that so many companies were trying to do this as part of their strategy because it has such a heavy lift. And that tactic is podcasts. There are a lot of people that want to implement podcasts as part of their brand visibility campaign. What they don't realize is that a podcast on its own has a huge time and effort requirement that goes into it. If you want a podcast to be a visibility machine for you, in the way that social media is a machine for some companies, you need to be producing at least one podcast episode a week, which has a huge time and energy commitment, but also a huge budgetary commitment that goes along with it. The only way that that actually works for most of the clients that we work with is if they are creating a podcast in a video format that allows us to multi-purpose that for a lot of different things, or they're using other content and repurposing it for a podcast. So let me give you a couple of examples for that. You could record a podcast episode on video that goes out as a podcast, but also goes out as YouTube video, and then can be chopped up for LinkedIn content, and then can be repurposed for your email content and shorts on YouTube, and then can be reused in your sales deck or as touch points in your email campaigns. Or using a webinar and repurposing that as a podcast in addition to all of those other things. There always has to be a plan for how you're going to use that content and how you're going to be consistent with producing the content. And anything that you're doing in the realm of a podcast is always going to require a lot of effort. So if you don't have someone in-house that can manage that process, from the ideation to the editing to the deployment to the promotion, which is another big piece of creating a successful podcast, then I would recommend against investing in that type of initiative. The other problem with podcasts is that it is very hard, especially in this space, to get your audience to tune in. The problem being that this is a limited audience that's listening in an audio format, and there are already a lot of successful podcasts in healthcare and health tech. So essentially, you need to convince someone to stop tuning into a show that they're already listening to, because people have limited time for listening to podcasts, especially something related to work. And you need to convince them to come listen to yours instead. That's more challenging when you think about the fact that a lot of these podcasts that are successful are produced by very large organizations that have a lot of dollars to put behind the machine. So consider wisely whether a podcast is something that's going to actually produce for you, or if it's just a nice to have that maybe you look at doing down the road when your budget grows. Okay. And then the final challenge that I typically recommend that clients are careful with is PR. I have seen many companies in this space confuse marketing and PR, think that they are the same thing, and they're really not. They are very different aspects of visibility and promotion for your brand. Think of PR as the outlet that is someone else promoting your business, and marketing as the outlet that is you promoting your business. You're always going to have a more cost-effective option when you're doing the promoting versus someone else doing the promoting. And before you come at me and say, well, if I get a media outlet to talk about me, then that's free publicity for my business. Yes, it is, but getting those types of placements is challenging. So what I recommend is choosing a strategy for marketing and getting a foundational strategy set up and running and consistent with your digital marketing, and then slowly layering on a PR strategy on top of that so that you're really maximizing your budget and only expanding what you're doing in that space when you have the dollars to do so. You can be a lot more targeted with that smaller budget and get really thoughtful and strategic with your approach when you also have the promotion for your business that you're doing on your own, because it gives you more credibility. It gives you a lot more to work with when you also have your own presence online. And it makes people like these news outlets more likely to want to work with you. It also gives you a lot more to work with if you are looking to win awards, which is a great part of your PR strategy. So all of these things are not necessarily things that you should completely cut from your strategy this year, but I would really encourage you, if they are part of your strategy this year, to be very strategic with how you put them out into the world. So what would I do to prioritize marketing as a health tech or B2B healthcare firm in 2024 with a limited budget? I'm so glad you asked. Let's talk about it. The first thing that I would absolutely tell every single client in this space to implement is a strong, robust LinkedIn campaign. So that means you're posting consistently, we're using video, we're connecting with people, we're asking people to follow our page regularly, we're sending messages, we're just using all of the functionality on LinkedIn to make sure that we're keeping our content high up in the algorithm, that it's visible, and that we are maximizing the time and energy that we pour into LinkedIn. LinkedIn tends to be a low budget, high ROI initiative, so that's always at the top of my list. The second thing is webinars, which has really gone up and down. I remember in the early 2010s, webinars were a huge part of the world, and then they kind of fell off the map. And then post-COVID, they really came back with a vengeance. And I would say that webinars are one of the top value add ways that our clients are seeing growth right now over the last 12 months. And the reason why I say that is that webinars on their own are pretty low time and cost to produce, but they create a huge value add way to either promote the value of your business, share educational content, or interview your customers in a way that's impactful for your listeners. It is something that you can do on your own or with partners, and it's something that can be very long or very short. You could run this as a standalone one-time webinar or as a series of webinars. There's a lot of different ways that you can repurpose that you can use this particular tactic as a standalone, but then repurpose the content in different ways. Because it is video content, you can take that long form content and reuse it on your website or on your YouTube page. You can cut it up into segments and use that in your LinkedIn content or on your YouTube page. You can use that content as a lead generation or lead nurturing tool. There's so many different ways to use that content, and that tends to be a high punch way to get in front of and hook people into the message that you want to share. Because when you do a webinar, you're really talking about impact. The content talks a lot about impact and value. And when you're able to cut those little segments out of the content that you've already produced as part of this webinar, you have a really impactful little short that can be used and reused. It's not a one-time use piece. It's something that you can use a lot of times over and over again. So kind of following that vein, the third thing that I would invest time and energy into this year is video content at large. So this could be video interviews or just video content from your team. It could be behind the scenes content from your company. It could be more of like a one-to-one storytelling opportunity. It could be talking about a particular feature or value add of a product. It could be talking about results from a case study. It can really be anything. The sky's the limit. Video content performs well online. People engage with it. You can use it in a lot of different ways. You can even use your video content and repurpose it as a podcast, like I said earlier. So there's a lot of things that you can do with video content, and the value of video is really only growing. So if that's not part of your strategy already, it should be. And the other thing that I will mention with video content is that you can take a lot of the things that are shared and turn it into static content. So it may help you create ideas for blog content or case studies, or for just simple LinkedIn posts with stats that maybe come out of those conversations, or informational shares. So the fourth thing that I would absolutely use this year is a strategic email campaign, ongoing throughout the year. I would have a plan for how you're going to use that. I would start an email calendar that allows you to really plan out your content and get your arms around what matters to your audience and how you're going to keep that content in front of them. And one of the things, that includes everything: a newsletter, a drip campaign, any kind of legislative updates that you want to share, or any kind of product updates that you want to share. You should have a plan for that. And that plan may ebb and flow, and it may change as the year progresses. But if you can start a spreadsheet where you can start tracking when you tentatively plan to send things out, it makes sure that you're not overusing email as a tactic. And it also helps you identify which audiences are receiving what content at what time, so you can be a little bit more balanced in your approach. And you can also be really careful about not overloading your team with a ton of email content to produce in a short period of time. Now, with that said, I am a huge fan of multi-purposing content that we're using in other places and using that for email. So that might mean if we have a blog post go out, that blog then becomes part of a drip campaign. If we have a video go out, then that video goes in the newsletter. If we have a webinar coming up, that becomes a standalone email campaign. So making sure that we're kind of using all of these other things to drive the email strategy is typically a really great way to build balance and make sure you're maximizing all of the things that you're doing across your marketing channels. And then the last thing piggybacks on what we talked about at the beginning of the video, and that's getting really invested in targeted events. I would work with your team to make a comprehensive list of all of the potential events that you would want to go to this year, or you've thought about going to this year. Compare that to your target audience and where you're really trying to focus your time, and choose the ones that best maximize your budget while keeping you in front of those targeted people. Which events are going to help you get in front of the people that are most likely to buy? What's going to give you the best opportunity to have conversations and build relationships? And then go from there. So events are very important. I feel like sometimes I talk poorly about the high budget cost of events, and they are a big budget cost, but I think that's why we have to be so strategic with how we're planning a strategy around these events. I hope that's helpful for you guys. Have a great rest of your day. My email is in the notes of this video. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time.